To go ahead and get started with the program. I just want to start off by saying good morning and thank you all for joining us today for today's program. My name is Olivia Cano and I'm the event specialist for GSEC. I'd just like to kick things off with a few housekeeping notes before we begin today's program. Please note that this is a Zoom meeting and not our typical webinar format. This is to encourage audience engagement and participation, but also means that you have the option to turn your microphone and camera on. Feel free to turn your camera on and be seen and see others in the room, as this is traditionally an in-person meeting, but keep in mind that today's meeting is being recorded. Additionally, please keep yourself muted unless you're actively speaking or asking a question. We encourage you to use the chat function to ask questions or comment on any part of the program that you find interesting. Prior to today's meeting, you should have received a link to our Champions Program landing page, which includes today's agenda and other materials and reports that will be referenced in today's program. This page also includes materials that we suggest you familiarize yourself with to gain a better understanding of economic development in the region, including a glossary of terms. We'll drop that link in the chat so it's readily available to you in just a moment. All registered attendees from today's meeting will receive a link to view the recording of today's program after the presentation. Additionally, you'll receive a link to fill out the survey and provide feedback on today's program, which is incredibly helpful for us as we can tailor our program to best serve the needs of the community into the future. Without further ado, I'd like to begin today's program and hand it off to newly elected City of Elk Grove Mayor Bobby Singh Allen to provide opening remarks. Mayor Bobby, go ahead. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
All right, great. Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's Champions program. I am Elk Grove's Mayor Bobby Singh Allen. I am thrilled to be here today and honored to be able to kick things off this morning. First, I want to thank Barry and his amazing staff at Greater Sacramento for organizing this Champions program. Educating our residents, business leaders, and elected officials on regional economic development is critical to our ability to attract business and investment in this region. Elk Grove has been a member of Greater Sacramento since its founding in 2014, and we are proud partners and supporters of their work. At over 176,000 people here in Elk Grove, it is the second largest city in the Greater Sacramento region. We have grown rapidly in the last 21 years since incorporation, but we haven't lost sight of our heritage, which dates back to 1850. Today, Elk Grove is a vibrant, thriving, diverse, and fast-growing modern community. We are quickly transforming from a bedroom community on the edge of the region to a regional employment center with an unsurpassed quality of life. In the last several years, we have added world-class civic amenities like our like our state-of-the-art community center, our aquatic center, and our animal shelter. We are actively upgrading our dining, shopping, entertainment, and our hospitality offerings. And we are tackling housing stock diversity and affordability so that employees can live and work right here in Elk Grove. We are nurturing our historic downtown and adding new, modern commercial corridors and job centers. We have created and opened the Laguna Springs Corporate Center and developed a planning framework for a 500-acre, 25,000 employee job center along Camera Road with zoning, CEQA, and design approvals built in. Our city council just approved a 600-acre industrial annexation project that will double the size of our manufacturing sector. We are building a key segment of the Capital Southeast Connector project along our southern border and fostering a robust pipeline of new manufacturing, office, hospitality, retail, and housing projects that build upon a strong corporate base of well-known brands like Apple, AllData, and the state of California. We support a growing startup cluster and a thriving small business sector. All of these efforts will allow us to retain, expand, and attract business that offer our residents employment opportunities closer to our home. The benefits of Elk Grove and the entire region, bringing more jobs, reducing traffic congestion and commute times, and generating fewer greenhouse gas emissions. We are open for business in Elk Grove. With a new mayor, a committed city council, a dedicated city manager and economic development team, and key regional partners like Greater Sacramento, Elk Grove is working day in and day out to attract new businesses and investment to our city and this region that enhance our quality of life and grow our economy. During today's program, GSEC will provide an overview of Greater Sacramento's value proposition, the pillars of economic development, key regional initiatives, and more. This session is designed to provide you with an understanding of the work being done in our region and the tools needed to champion economic growth, not only in our community, but the entire region. There will be breakout sessions later in the program to provide an opportunity for more engagement. But if you have questions during the program, we encourage you to use the chat function. Now, without further delay, I'd like to pass it over to Scott Powell, the Senior Vice President of GSEC. Thank you for this opportunity this morning. Welcome.
Great. Mayor Bobby, thank you very much for that warm introduction and setting the stage today. And thank you for all the attendees for joining us today. This is a really important program, and we're really excited to have you here. It takes all of us to build a vibrant and regional economy. So thank you again for sharing part of your day with us today. So going to jump right in and really start framing the discussion of what is economic development. And you've got a definition on the screen. And once upon a time in my life, I taught public policy at a college. And public policy used to be defined as anything a government chooses to do or not to do. Economic development is a little more narrow in that, although it is a part of policy. But really, the underpinning of it is to grow industry, create wealth, and the most important part too is making sure that all residents do benefit from that economic growth and vitality from an economy, so that everybody can join in it, but also so that economy does remain vibrant not only now but into the future. So, looking at where does a regional economy come from? We'll just go right to the next slide. Going to give you, going to give you 3 or 4 numbers here. So 2, 4, 2, and 1. So the number 2 comes from 2 places. It comes from people, or your human capital, and it comes from companies. So next, number 4. So we got the 4 things that really drive an economy. It's not complicated. This isn't macroeconomics in freshman year of college. So on the company side, it comes from increased company activity, new companies coming in, and then companies expanding into the region. That's kind of the tip of the spear and what most people think of what the Greater Sacramento Economic Council does, but we also focus on the other 3 things as well. So technological improvement, companies coming up with new innovative ways in which to grow and scale, scale their company, scale their brands. And that's really the company side of the equation. The other side of the equation is the labor force. So on the top part of, people becoming a higher skilled. So getting a college degree, learning a new skill or trade, and then growing that labor force, people coming into the local economy, all add to the economic vitality. So those are the 4 pillars. The next, number 2, what really comes from the, comes from a community is communities are formed for really 2 reasons from the time in which we started forming communities as humans. You came together for commerce or for security, not really worried about a bunch of barbarians sailing up the Sacramento River and sacking the place. So we're really all here for the economy and for commerce. And when you think of any great city across the world, you think of their business community and what really underpins that economy. And then the last one is everything we do is interconnected and regional. So if you can go to the next slide. It is a sea of white. And what you should be seeing is a really nice regional map. So, as we work through it, no more than 25% of a local economy from a community is really contained there. So as Mayor Allen was, or Mayor Singh was talking about, being a great place to live, work, and play, very important for a community, but only about 25% of your residents on the high end actually live and work in your community. So think about your friends, your neighbors, family members, that they probably live in one community and commute over to another one. Our economy is all interconnected. So the Greater Sacramento region, we're interconnected through our 8 county region, which is interconnected to the mega region into the greater, San Francisco Bay Area, which is interconnected with the state, which is interconnected to the country, which is interconnected to the rest of the world. So that interconnectivity is really important. So as one community sees, strength in its economy, the rest of us benefit as well. Let's see if I've got a nice visual aid. Here we go. We're playing with fire again. So you can see for the the major communities that are members of the Greater Sacramento region, as on the city level, of what percentage of your residents live and work, and this comes from the U.S. Census. That does fluctuate. You can see some on the low end, some on the high end, but 25% is really that number. So it's really important that we come up with a regional value proposition and we all grow together as a region. So, so going to the next slide, kind of taking it back to individuals and how do we grow that human capital? So as you can see, the Sacramento State has increased its graduation rate. That is increasing our human capital, our economic competitiveness, grows the region as they learn and grow those skill sets. That comes into the economy, makes our businesses more productive. And UC Davis only retaining 31% of the graduates, is a very, very small number. That should be probably about twice that. But the important thing is there, and as you look as compared to some of our, competitive areas, and you'll be hearing a lot about Portland and Austin today, is, the percentage of individuals that have bachelor degrees. And you can see that's growing, which helps the vibrancy of the Greater Sacramento economy. So on the next slide, to kind of really further that is, we've got almost 400,000 students in four-year educational facilities within a 100-mile radius. That's 3 times what they have in Portland and 65% more than Austin. So the access to talent here is unsurpassed. We have got great alumni networks. You can see Berkeley's got over 8,000 alumni living in the area. UC Davis accordingly at 50,000. And then some other major California schools have their alumni as well. Why this is important is, again, is not only those educational, skills that they have, but also those underlying demographics that, that support the regional economy. But really what's made California the most innovative economy in the world is the fact that we have the most innovative university systems in the world. And that is, that's not by accident. That is why the California dream has been so prevalent since the 1940s and 50s, is because of the great university systems and what we've invested in it as a state within the education process. So on the next slide, even though that we've got that, those great underpinnings, the California brand is frequently ranked last in, the competitive nature of business class. And, that doesn't help, as we're looking at growing our regional and local economies, as the state sets that, that brand and reputation. So as we'll talk about a little bit later, that is part of their role and doesn't help us, grow that. But having those great, innovative ecosystems like our universities really do help us, grow the economy. So on the human capital side of having strong educational, partners and keeping those graduates in the area will only help us grow and advance our local economy. So on the next slide, I'm going to take you guys through a little bit of story and take you all the way back to 2006. So why 2006? So that was the last full year of economic growth before the Great Recession. So back in the day when you're updating your MySpace page or listening to Nickelback, the city of Sacramento and Portland were roughly on the same footing. And if you kind of looked at Austin, it was really kind of in the rearview mirror. It was a great place to get some barbecue, some weird things going on. University of Texas had some good football way back then. But other than that, Sacramento and Portland were really on the same footing, and Austin was a laggard. Fast forward through a Great Recession and up until 2019, some of those underpinnings have changed. And you'll see on the next slide, we have not done a good job, staying up and competing with Portland and Austin. And as I mentioned earlier, when you think of great communities, you think of great companies. When you think of Austin, you think of Dell, Whole Foods, or Yeti. I mean, if Whole Foods can sell you a green pepper for $4 a piece, or Yeti a $400 cooler, which an Igloo one will do almost as good of a job for $25, that is amazing human capital that are coming up with cool, innovative, and thoughtful ways to sell a product. And then a Portland with Nike. And Columbia are all all companies that when you think of Portland, you think of Nike. When you think of Dell, you think of Austin, and vice versa. There's by no accident. So when you see here tradable industry sector jobs, Sacramento has only 24% of our jobs is tradable, where Austin's at 33 and Portland's at 37, which really explains why we have not kept pace. Population hasn't increased as much. Our educational attainment is lagged as well, which wasn't the case. In our growth, in our gross regional product, outpaced Portland barely, but really lagged Austin during that time. And part of that reason is those two areas were either deliberate in how they grew their economy. The state of Texas has economic development in its state constitution. The state of Texas has really driven that economic growth that Austin has benefited from. And then in Portland, they've really benefited for some great brands being in there and having a reputation as a cool place to be in. So that human capital has disproportionately flowed into the Portland area because it is seen as a great place to live. And when Michelle is up talking about, some of our talent attraction campaigns, is the reason why we're doing it is to help grow the economy through, bringing in talented and innovative people. But so that's the kind of that lay of the land is we're starting to catch up, but we need to be even more deliberate and more thoughtful of how we grow the economy. It doesn't happen by accident. It happens through a very concerted and thoughtful effort at the state level, at the regional level, and again, at the local level. So on the next slide, Brookings, is a global or actually a nationwide research group that spends a lot of time thinking about how regions grow and thrive. So yesterday they released their 2021 numbers. So this slide is as of yesterday. So comparing our year over year. And this is looking at the top 53 metros. The top 53 metros are metropolitan areas that have a million people or more. So as you can see, growth, we've been about flat, kind of middle of the pack, same with prosperity. We're stepping up on inclusion, which really goes to wage growth and, and poverty indicators. And if you see Austin has really started to slip is they've been very careful in curating their regional economy, but have not really thought about, people at all levels of the income spectrum, and it's starting to come back to haunt them. So, so as you can see, if you're not careful in thinking about how you grow your entire economy, things can slide, as what you're seeing in Austin's case right here. But you've heard me mention tradable industry sectors, and that's not an accident. It's a fairly important thing. If we go to the next two slides, we'll just go to the next one. There are two, go back one. Two parts of an economy. There's tradable industries and non-tradable. Sometimes referred to as basic, non-basic, but really there are 2 points to it. Not saying one is more important than the other. There's the tradable industry sectors, and these are jobs and parts of the economy that bring wealth from outside the region into the region. So life science companies, manufacturing. So we'll pick on Nike again. So Nike in Oregon, comes up with a really cool, expensive, innovative shoe. That shoe is made, over in Asia by children and then purchased throughout the world. That wealth, some of that goes back to the country where it was made, but the vast majority of the wealth created by that shoe flows back into the Portland economy. And that supports their supply chain, their creators, and all the non-tradable sector jobs. And non-tradable, again, very important to the economy. Doctors, you can argue lawyers, healthcare providers, restaurants, hairstylists, all the things you think of when you think of a local economy are on the non-tradable side. Very, very important, but they don't create or generate the same amount of wealth or economic activity. You want to grow your non-tradable, you want more restaurants, more cool bars or places to get bruschetta. you need a strong tradable industry sector to create the jobs and investment coming in to support those restaurants, support those dry cleaners or hairstylists. So this isn't a value differential, but it's the two, trade off of each other and are highly dependent upon each other, because a company is also not going to come into a community that doesn't have a great non-tradable sector underpinnings as well, that doesn't have a cool quality of life. So the two are symbiotic, and you need to grow, you need to grow them both. But absent the tradable sectors, the non-tradable cannot grow. So on the next slide, there's what's called a multiplier effect. So a non-tradable usually only creates one additional job in the region for each job it creates. So a restaurant, fairly shallow supply chain, and doesn't really, create that many more jobs throughout the local economy. We're a tradable sector. So if we think about a life science company that has to get reagents and vials and all those things that go in, that's a pretty deep supply chain. They tend to pay a lot more, and that money kind of goes back into the economy and recirculates, which supports anywhere between 2.5 to 5 additional jobs throughout the region. So focusing on the tradable sector is something we spend a lot of time and energy at the Greater Sacramento Economic Council, because we know by supporting that, it will support the non-tradable sector, and it'll continue to grow and create that great quality of life throughout the region. So really briefly on the next slide. So how you create that is really creating a there for the industry sector. So one of my first economic development jobs was in Michigan for a small community, and our board chair was like, Scott, we need to create a life science strategy. And we had 0 life science firms. We had 0 people out of work in the life science industry, and only a few life scientists that commuted up to Michigan State occasionally. So looking at it, it didn't make sense as a strategy. So you need those anchor institutions, those companies, those universities, the healthcare system, et cetera, to really anchor and kind of create that there for it. So 15 years later, they're still running a life science strategy, and they still have 0 life science jobs in the area, because there isn't that anchor institution, there isn't the talent, and there isn't the underpinnings of the economy that can support that. The cluster just doesn't exist. So you really need those kind of key components. So Barry will talk to you a little bit later about the California Mobility Center, but that has really, kind of created that tradable industry cluster. By creating that, the Mobility Center will allow this region to be a player for mobility industries. So if we can go to the next slide. And so you can see here, and Barry will talk to you a little bit more about this, but really, this is going to be launching, I believe, at the, end of this week, or I think early next week. I can't remember the exact date. So give or take a week, but will really help innovate and create a robust ecosystem for mobility companies in the region. So that's kind of how the economy works, why tradable sectors are important. So next up is the different roles. So if you go to the next slide, so each one has a different role: a local role, a state role, and a regional role. Each are important, each have a place to play. So first off is the state. So the state's role in economic development is really spearheaded by GoBiz. They set the strategic direction and reputation for the state. They provide different services and programs. And any company that's looking at a new location, whether it's overseas or domestically, first has to determine, are they willing to be within the state of California? Do they need that presence? Does that support their business case? So once they've said, okay, the state of California makes sense, then it comes into the regional area. So the state will coordinate with the region. So the regional groups, in this case, Greater Sacramento Economic Council, we provide that competitive value proposition, so vis-a-vis every other region, because a company is going to look at that region, before it starts figuring out where does it want to be on the local level. So part of our role is to support regional efforts to really put that value brand and value proposition for the region and provide the data analytics behind it to make sure that the region is competitive and our best foot is forward. And then when it comes to the local level, kind of the last mile, the red zone, if you're a football fan, if you will, is where the built environment is. That kind of creates that sense of, that sense of place and how in which that company and community is going to work and grow. So, but all 3 of these each have their distinct role in, growing and, attracting a company, growing a company and providing that value proposition. And it works best when each party understands its role, works together through that role, and and to grow the economy. Again, mentioned Texas a couple times. I don't think anybody does it better than Texas, with maybe the exception of Virginia, of having a highly coordinated state, regional, and local. But on the California side, I can say bar none, on a coordinated regional and local level, that the Sacramento area, we've heard from site selector consultants, from even GoBiz, that we're a very well coordinated and deliberate organization and how in which we go about representing the region. And that comes from people like you, our champions, that are out there advocating for the growth of this local economy and working together with us and with your communities to grow the region for the better. So kind of some last thoughts here is, talking about how we tell our story. And so if we think to, if you remember the 80s, you'll remember the old notion of Massachusetts used to be referred to as Taxachusetts. High taxes, high regulation. They spent 20 years very deliberately retooling its economy and how in which it operates. And Massachusetts is, on a terms of innovation, is one of the most innovative state economies, nowhere near as much as California, but spent 20 years undoing that brand and reputation. So as we're seeing these companies that we have up here talking about California, when you hear companies like Tesla and Oracle and HP and Disney not saying positive things, that resonates and doesn't help our brand. So even though we spend a lot of time talking about all the positives of California, and there are many, this is what tends to resonate. So it's important for us to come up with that thoughtful and cohesive value proposition. So about 3 weeks ago on CNBC, there's a 20-minute story, and we'll follow up and send it to you. So it's got about 6 million views on YouTube right now, talking about the California exodus. And so companies, reporters talking about companies leaving the area. There's about 3 or 4 minutes of much watched television on there where Barry Broom is laying out why California is a great place to do business. Of all the key assets that we have the most innovative, productive people in the country. The most innovative companies have started here, grown here, the most productive people, and the best university system that still make California a good place to do business. So we need to be deliberate and keep focusing on those, and how to reposition so we can continue to grow and allow people to realize the California dream. So as I wrap up here, a few of the kind of the takeaways is, the economy is regional. That growth will drive that prosperity and inclusion. And, we are creatures of the state, but as long as we continue to cultivate and encourage innovative companies, invest in our people to grow our human capital, we'll continue to have a successful economy. And our focus is to not only have a successful, to be the most successful in the in the state and in the West Coast as well, because we know we live in one of the greatest regions in the country, and we're going to do everything we can to keep it going, and we're doing that with everybody's support. So with that, is there any questions?
Scott, I actually have one.
Yes.
Are the low tradable numbers affected due to our low housing inventory?
For the tradable ones, it just goes to, kind of what Sacramento has always been a government town. There hasn't been that deliberate focus on, growing tradable sectors. If you look at, HP, or Hewlett Packard coming in and then leaving, Aerojet, and used to employ, tens of thousands of people, now employs 300. Hasn't been that deliberate cultivation of that. So housing inventory, I think on a go forward basis, is going to be a threat. We have not built nearly enough. So that's something that could be a risk in the future, but it isn't something that's impeding it now. I think it's more of what happened was just that lack of focus and being deliberate of cultivating the economy and being proactive of going after that.
So not necessarily affected if we can't house the employees. That's not directly affected by housing.
It's it can be if you do have that mass housing shortage. It could be, and we are running into that as of now, being we've underbuilt for the past decade. So that can slow that talent attraction piece or push up the prices where people can't get in. But, as if some, San Francisco has still been the most innovative economy in the world at a, price point of 1.5 million. So that alone won't do it. But for us to be inclusive and accessible to everybody, we need housing options at all income levels, not just the high end. And we need to make sure we have some lower end so people can grow up and continue to remain in the, in the region. So.
Well, I wanted to add, Scott, the one thing we got to realize around here is, the Bay Area digested all that inequality and its balance because it was the most powerful economy in the world. So if you're in New York City and you get a really bad housing balance and you're the financial center on the planet Earth, you can muscle through that. The biggest challenge we have with the California state government is, it's misaligned in its thinking and policies from a socioeconomic perspective. That's our view of it. We're not bashers of the government. That's just our observation. And we think the data, with poverty being so high in California and homeless being so high and educational attainment for our children being so low, we think the scorecard of our current philosophy as a government is in our hands. And of course, no one wants to redirect now for a million reasons, special interest group, rough politics. I've never seen politics like this in my life. They're so harsh. But so the challenge here in Sacramento region, we start getting way out of balance on the housing side. We're not the center of the universe economically. So I think, I've never been a guy who brought up housing threats because we've never had them. I don't know. I was on another call. I missed some of Scott's presentation, but median incomes and housing prices were constant here, clear up through 2019. They're way out of whack now. I mean, we're going to have a housing crisis here in the next 2 years. That's going to be very serious. And the challenge with a heavily regulated real estate market, we're pivoting like the Titanic, right? We see it coming. We're trying to avoid the iceberg, but we're so big. And, the government has complicated our ability to be mobile on the ground. We're praying for a near miss, but we've watched this housing market go from stable, responsible, aligned with the wages to just COVID with 44,000 people moving here. COVID has just flipped that. So now we're now, one of our competitiveness objectives is going to be, and this is one of the values of the organization. Hey, we have all the city managers and mayors on our board, so we can have this one conversation, but we need to build 150,000 houses in the next 10 years, 150,000 units. And, we're projected to build half that. And then, with the migration up from the Bay Area, do the math. So there's two things we don't want to be when it comes to San Francisco. We don't want to mirror their housing challenges, and we don't want to mirror their homeless challenges. And so you're going to see us do a lot more, at least analytically. We're not going to become the service provider of housing, but we build these big evidence and analytic platforms so we can communicate to policymakers. We're going to start feeding people housing and homeless strategies, just like we do. Here's how you build a technology accelerator. The technology accelerator will be hands-on, but the homeless and the housing piece has to become a benchmark that we start measuring and studying. And I think we got to take it out of the political leaders' hands, because between the politics and the regulations and the challenging fiscal budgets, I don't think they can get in front of it. So that's gonna have to be a civic mission to do that. All right, speaking of civic missions.
Great transition, Barry.
Where was I? Anyway, well, first off, thank you for being here and thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. We let Scott go first because he wanted to talk. So we figured if he went first, he'd have more than 3 minutes. So this is what you call a public-private partnership. And this organization is 6 years old. I'm the founding CEO. We've been around, we've had so much visibility. I think people come up to me, what, you've been here 12 years? I'm like, probably feels that way for you. So I've been here 6 years, started it from a file. The CEOs acquired Sacto. Sacto was a $1.8 million operation. And this is another challenge we have in our community. We love nonprofits. We got lots of them, and none of them have the money to deliver their service, but we got lots of them. If we had less of them, there'd be plenty of money to lead really efficient and productive outcomes. So the CEOs were like, hey, we're tired of giving $10,000 to 15 organizations and then having them tell us the same things. So we're going to give $100,000 to one organization. We're going to pull out of all these other nonprofits, and we're going to build institutional capacity for the community. We as CEOs will serve on this board, and this is our civic responsibility to the community. So this is a very important, you're going to see both Michael Porter out of Harvard, Scott Galloway out of NYU. They're both talking now about how the communities that are solving their problems in America have their CEOs at the table working with them to solve those problems. So how many CEOs are at the table in San Francisco? None. How many CEOs are at the table in Silicon Valley? None. How many CEOs are at the table in Los Angeles? None. Go look at those problems. You know, and what happens when you don't have that CEO business leadership, the political leaders are left to manage all these complex special interest groups, and they just get rolled. So the goal was to build an institution with enough capacity to provide the communities to plug into and get one economic development delivery system. So if a business comes up here to look at our community, they don't have to talk to 9 local cities, get 9 sets of messages. Because the other thing that was going on before this organization got formed, and this is a Salesforce feedback, Salesforce came up here in 2013, 2014, look in the office, they zeroed in on 3 communities. Each community's presentation told them what was wrong with the other 2 communities. It's a natural instinct for provincial parochial behavior among communities. So this is also, hey, you come here, you like Roseville, you like Folsom, you like Davis, they're all 3 great communities. And we'll show you why they're all 3 great communities, and just pick one. And then the next company comes in, looks at 3 communities, they're all great, just pick one. You know, versus that one's no good, that one's no good, ours is good. And then Salesforce's feedback to us was, when we were done, we just got a negative impression of the town, because each community had a negative pitch on the other 2 communities. So it's very important that these protocols get entrenched to where there is no competition between Folsom and Roseville. The competition is between us and Texas. People aren't, you know, if somebody puts 1,000 jobs in Folsom, 500 people from Roseville will work at that and play. How many Roseville residents work at Intel? How many Folsom residents worked at HP? How many people go to Davis and work at the university from Woodland or from Winters or from Sacramento? How many people drive downtown from the outlying areas? Go look at the 65. So it's a jobs and income program and a market program, and it's a clean, simple process for everybody to evaluate, you know, what are we doing in generating leads? So when we're generating leads, every one of your economic development directors see those leads. And then, of course, we have the analytics platform to answer the question. So it's just like everything now in life, it's a digital analytics exchange. Employers don't come up here and go golfing with us. You know, they don't go to the steakhouses. You know, they don't stop by the Westfield Mall and see how beautiful it is. When an employer is evaluating this market, it's 2 28-year-old kids with MBAs from NYU sitting in an office outside of Manhattan, crunching numbers on Placer County or El Dorado Hills. And then they hand an analytics platform to the company, and then the company starts cutting people off based upon their inability to produce the inputs they need to grow their business. That's literally the simple version of it. Of course, you know, brand matters. Michelle Willard's on with us today. So when you see all these great stories about our community, Michelle Willard's putting those out. So what we do is we take the analytics platforms that the top investors want, and then we find the indications in our market that they exist, like we're the number 3 location for tech employees now leaving the Bay Area. And then we build a brand around the analytics. And then, you know, as people evaluate the market, do searches, all of a sudden they're picking up Sacramento Business Stories or San Francisco Business Journal says, surprising, all the top talents move into the Sacramento region. And then that gets to the point to where they engage us, and then we feed them the hard evidence that what we're saying is true. So this is really probably the most important thing we do for the community, because just maintaining the analytics platform is about $500,000 or $600,000 a year. So it's a shared service model back to the communities because number one, they might not have the expertise to do it, but number two, none of them have 600 grand to do it, right? So Sacramento County can't do it. The cities can't do it. The bigger governments can't do it. You know, the smaller ones, whether it's a Loomis or a LinkedIn, I mean, how could an Elk Grove come up with $600,000 to maintain an evidential platform? Because that's what the employers are looking at. And they look at very specific trends, and I'll share with that later. So it's the CEOs meeting their civic obligation, providing a service model to their community. You're not asking them to, you know, do things they're not experienced or comfortable in. You don't ask them to help you with climate change. You know, they're not working on fixing the K-12 system. You know, they don't have any expertise on that. So the CEOs get engaged, and all of a sudden they know marketing, they know business, you know, they know what an operation looks like. They understand balance sheets, they understand HR policy. So they're actually working on behalf of the community at something they're an expert in. They get very comfortable with that because they know what to do. Then they have their peers together, and that's how you find other things that happen. And I'll talk a little bit about that. The second thing we do for the communities is we make sure they get a financial rate of return. So over the 6 years of the formation of the organization, we got about $6 million. Why don't you flip back that slide? $6 million from the local governments. What did they get for $6 million? They got all the services, they got all the programming, they got the branding and the marketing, and they got $76 million in cash. We actually gave them 70 times back their money. And so when you look at California, which isn't very adept at economic development, you look at Texas, if you've ever wondered, like, how do these states pay their incentive programs off when they land these companies? The fact of the matter is these companies throw off way more cash than what they get in the form of incentives. And if you don't do it that way, you'll be real sorry real quick. So I don't know how many of you remember the HQ2 battle. Remember they went into New York? This is the best example I can give you. They did a national search. They chose New York City. New York City and the state of New York gave them a $1 billion incentive. They were going to pay New York City $5 billion. So New York was going to get HQ2, going to get the Amazon headquarters, get all the jobs, all the technology, all the reputation, and put $4 billion in their pocket. But the Congresswoman from New York, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, focused on the $1 billion, and she didn't really understand it because she's new, and she was operating like New York City took $1 billion out of their general fund and handed it over to Jeff Bezos. It took 5 days for Amazon to pull out. So that also lets you know how much crap these guys are willing to put up with. Not much. Everybody wants them. People are willing to do backflips. They throw off a lot of income. And just in our work, you know, which, you know, we hope will get a lot better, 76 times the money went back to the communities. And so financially modeling how you invest in economic development is really important. State of California doesn't really do that very well. And, you know, so it's very important for you to understand dynamic modeling. So dynamic modeling is they gave us 6, we gave them 76 million. Static modeling is we gave you 6, we got nothing back. That's how California looks at an economic program. So next slide, please. The other reason why it's so important to work together is, you know, the economy is about people and jobs, not where the company locates. Where a company locates matters, but not that much. Where the people live and how well they're trained and employed is where you get most of your income. So 2/3 of all the economic impact of an employer is where their employee lives. And that's good news because if you look around regionally, I mean, 21%, well, this is the ROI number. So you can see the ROI goes directly back to the city. I thought this was the employment number. I looked at Yolo County and went, how the heck did they get 125% employment? But so you can also show, here's the macro impact, but even a small community that made like a Galt that doesn't necessarily get a location, or a Citrus Heights, which doesn't even have a piece of real estate to locate a company in, they still have Citrus Heights residents working at Centene. You know, Galt's got residents working at Centene. So even in the case where you don't even have the capacity to locate a company like Loomis, That doesn't mean your employees aren't working. That doesn't mean a Loomis resident isn't the marketing manager at Penumbra in Roseville. So the return is macro and directly too. So obviously, one of the things we are big believers in, and it's happening now, is we wanted to be a big decision maker in California, and that's happening now. I mean, that's very recent. So weird things happen, but all of a sudden we have like influence in California. It's about like 4 months old. I don't know what happened, but all of a sudden, you know, I'm getting calls out of LA and San Francisco and San Diego, and we have access to Gavin Newsom's cabinet. That's like 6 months old. My first 3 years in the job, you know, I used to tell the board I was the Fuller Brush salesman. I don't know if you ever did any door-to-door encyclopedia sales when you were a kid, but I would like knock on people's door. They'd open it up. Hi, I'm from the Sacramento area. Bam, they'd slam it on me. Bang, 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 bang. They'd open the door. Bam, they'd slam it on me. I mean, it was crazy, the response that we got in that first 3 years. So a lot of what we do, I made 2,133 one-on-one presentations between San Francisco and San Jose. That is an actual CRM documented number, one-on-one. I started off pitching the custodians and the receptionists. And then I got into the community relations people. And then I got to the corporate real estate people. And now, you know, we get pretty high level presentations. And I think somewhere between the consistency and the improvement in the reputation of the town, we now have pretty strong penetration. So the other thing we want to do, right, internally, we want to bang on the government to improve and challenge them for failing us. Externally, we want to sell gold, right? Externally, it's the greatest place in the world. Internally, you got to give us some relief on labor laws. You guys got to help us on housing. You got to clean up your workforce system. Externally, hey, we're the 5th biggest, largest economy in the world. We control the technology market. All the bright kids want to be here. So it's very important to understand we got 2 messages. Internally, challenging the status quo. Externally, reestablishing California as the best place in the world to be. And we do have metrics that say that. One of them is California businesses make more money than Texas businesses do. So if you have an insurance company in Dallas or an insurance company in Placer County, you're making more money in Placer County. If you own a bar and restaurant in downtown San Francisco, or you own a bar and restaurant in downtown Austin, state's not going to ask you for any tax income. California's going to take 13% net, you're up. So the reason the lights are still on in our town is California is the most profitable place and the most productive place for business in America. Most profitable, most productive. The number 2 is the Seattle market. So, and we literally crush Texas. But as you guys know, many of your business people and policymakers, when you move downstream from the nerve center, right? When you get out of a profit center and you go into an operating center, well, what's your operating center? It's just a cost problem, right? So as you operate your business downstream, those become cost centers. So what's wiping out the middle class in California is we can't maintain the cost centers. So if somebody wants to put 2,000 back office jobs for a financial institution and pay them $75,000 a year, you're crazy if you do that in California. The costs are off by $30,000, $40,000 a head. So those jobs go to Salt Lake and Phoenix. And so in Salt Lake and Phoenix, all those people are making $75,000, $85,000 a year. Here in California, you're either making it or you're not. Then you're having this blowout on the middle class. It's leading to all the social unrest. So the irony behind all these labor laws and policies, what it's really doing is pushing the middle class jobs out of California, creating the equity gap. So it's all about unintended consequences, right? So we have this horrible unintended consequence on the regulatory side because, you know, guys going to put 1,000 manufacturing jobs in and pay people $55,000 a year. I mean, why would you pay all of the workers' comp, the tort, the labor? Why would you stack that on a simple job you can find in 48 states? And the answer is you won't. And so the Tesla supply chain leaves and so on and so forth. And then what happens when companies mature, like an Oracle, now all of a sudden you're Oracle and you're in Menlo Park or Mountain View and you got 23,000 people down there and you're paying everybody 140 grand a year and nobody can live there anymore. You're like, geez, you know, $140,000 a year in Austin, not too bad. You know, housing market, same as Sacramento region, rents slightly low, and you don't pay any taxes. So that's the battle. It's the battle over the middle income jobs that we're losing. And then the small businesses here, you know, they don't scale as quickly because they run into these problems and they figure out how to outsource and, you know, contract with somebody in North Carolina. So there's this entire job avoidance strategy between the wages of $48,000 and $75,000 a year, that if we could get some relief on the labor laws, you'd see those jobs all over the Central Valley. You'd see them in Fresno, you'd see them in Stockton, you'd see them up here, you'd see them in Vacaville, you'd see them in Bakersfield, because it'd be better for the companies in the big metros to have their downstream jobs, you know, within 30 to 45 minutes of where they live. But if the government makes that too expensive and it's a cost center, there's no value in high costs on a cost center. You can cover value of high cost on an engineering center because you might be getting the best engineers in the world. So that's the debate. This basically, these are all the things that we do to address these issues. So this basically is an E&Y report. So Ernst & Young put this report out. They were commissioned by the Rockefeller Foundation. And it basically says, when it comes to investing public money on things that help businesses, California is better at it than everybody else. So that basically speaks to almost 10 times the amount of training dollars over other states. Now, we don't manage it very well, but like our community colleges are flush with cash. Our workforce systems have a lot of money. We put money in the public health care options. All these things are perceived as making the market more efficient for business. So really, when it comes to public investment, California rate's very high. And the actual effective tax rate in California is lower than what people think because we have so many special tax treatments. But the liability in the market and the contingent costs on businesses and the interference and the inability to predict what you're going to have to do next with this constantly activated government, this is where all of our problems lie. And so washing that out is one of the things we're going to work on. So regionally, we're going to do very well. I mean, we're going to have a phenomenal 3 or 4 year run. It's going to be ridiculous. So we already have been sharing our workforce with the Bay Area. So part of what we've been doing with a mega region strategy is getting the the Bay Area and Greater Sacramento operate as a single market. And you're seeing more and more of that coming out of the Bay Area Council. So you're now starting to see the Bay Area Council talking about Sacramento as its solution, right? So if we could get a transit, right, between Sacramento region and the Bay Area, we can bring down some of the congestion and impacted nature of the Bay Area and shift some of those people and jobs to Sacramento and keep them in California. This has been a market positioning exercise that we've done from the very beginning, and it's now becoming more and more real. Obviously, you know, seamlessly connected to the Bay Area, we have a very strong airport. You know, it's the #1 mid-tiered airport in the US. And one of the things, we have to do a better job at marketing that, but other than international flights, you really can't do better. But from a market standpoint, we have like 17 flights to Seattle. So what we do on the Hedgehog is like, hey, we've got 25 flights to LA, 17 flights to Seattle. So if you're in the Greater Sacramento region, you know, LA is the number 12 number 12 market in the world. Seattle is the 4th most innovative market in the world. So a lot of these are kind of hedgehog strategies for us where it's like, look, if you're in our community, not only do we have our own economy and you can leg it into the Bay Area and pitch VCs and tech companies, but you know, you got 20 flights to LA and 17 to Seattle. So you can go into these other bigger international markets really easy with short flights. So you're going to see a big Seattle, Greater Sacramento connection coming very, very soon. You're going to see it first in the life science sector, and then you're going to see it in the digital tech sector. So let me move this baby over. Okay. So obviously, you know, these things are really more brand, but you know, we're probably the #1 now net millennial migration. So when you see these pitches and these pitch points, can you hear the criticisms people have been telling you about your town for the last 20 years? You don't know, kids want to live there. You guys don't have young talent. There's nothing to do. Da, 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 da. So when we get these data points, they counter those kind of lagging brand views of our community and pump that out. So I can't tell you how many times in 15 and 16, I'd be down in San Francisco going to dinner with a decision maker. And, you know, they're very rude down there. No offense to people that are from San Francisco, but they're incredibly rude. They're like almost like a weird version of New Yorkers, where they would just sit there and tell me everything wrong with our community. Nobody ever want to live in your town. And yeah, I had people say things like, if we moved our division here, our CEO would jump off the Golden Gate Bridge. And this is no lie. This is how people would talk. If you haven't gotten that fun feedback. So it's kind of fun to see that change, because you know, we're proud of the outcomes in the work. But they're also, when we hear this over and over again, no young people want to live here. Number 3 for net millennial migration in the US is the evidence that we use to counter those things. The production and profitability evidence is what we use to counter the tax conversation. So these brands are not insignificant. They're directly overlaying constant criticism that we hear from the marketplace. And then obviously we had 41,000 Bay Area people move here over 2 quarters, a la the 8.5%, 7.5% rise in rents. So this may not slow down, but even with the rents, our housing appreciations are still below the national average. Housing appreciations are like 13% nationally. They've been incredibly high, but we actually now know that's going to bump up again. We're trending towards a 16% housing bump in the next 12 months. That's a big bump, and that's not healthy. And we can email this to anybody. So going through again, all data and evidence. Sorry, you don't have the talent. Okay, we've got twice the national average of software. We've got 3 times the national average of computer hardwares. And then of course, our annual growth in population with tech degrees is very high. So a lot of times when they take a snapshot of your town, you have to make sure you're showing them a trajectory. So trajectory is everything. Next slide. So the reason you're hearing us talk about housing, and you haven't heard us talk about housing before, housing was not only an advantage from a lifestyle and livability standpoint, but housing keeps your payroll in check. So really at the end of the day, payroll and real estate costs are 85% of the cost of running a business. It's not taxes. So we try to always remind people that, yeah, Austin's payroll pricing's going up, Denver's payroll pricing's going up. So Seattle's got a 0 income tax on the personal and corporate side, but yet the cost of doing business in Seattle is higher than here, because you have to bake in the payroll dollars to manage what is now an average housing price of about $1.1 million. So when that housing price goes up, Austin's are going to skyrocket. When that housing price goes up, then the payrolls have to match that housing price. That's why when we were talking about earlier, median incomes and median housing prices were running at the exact same trend, about 4.5%. So we weren't getting out of balance. Now you're going to have a housing price run at 7.5%, and your income's going to go up. By the way, we're number 3 in personal income growth, but incomes aren't going to keep up with housing over the next 2 years, which means you're going to start to throw yourself out of balance. And the only way that gets fixed is more houses or higher payroll. And if your payroll starts going up, then pretty soon your tax liability becomes more profound and you lose your conversation on a cost advantage. So employee experience, if you pick up McKinsey or E&Y or Deloitte, we pay attention to industry language. So now, and they shift quickly. Now employee experiences are really an assessment. And of course, that's where our lifestyle of being here with our own lifestyle, proximity to Tahoe, Napa, the Sierras, on and on. So our diversity in our lifestyle and our improvement of our urban lifestyle simultaneously is really going to benefit us. And of course, we talked about this already. As you can see, it's just, we want to stay under 500,000, and we can do that with production. But, Seattle's just going through the roof. Housing prices are going through the roof. Rents are going through the roof. So therefore the payrolls have to match it. And now if you're a medium, small business in Seattle, your people can't live there and you can't afford to hire people. And it's literally going to put that kind of pressure. So we are paying attention to that. A big part of what we do, I mean, a lot of people think, oh, hey, the Greater Sacramento Economic Council, they work with big companies. I don't know if you've ever heard that, but we don't work with big companies. We work with industry. Big difference between working with big companies and working with industry. There's no expertise for big companies. And so what we focus on is what are the industries of the future? You know, and one of the things that happens to communities is once an industry pops, then they start chasing it, right? So you look down at the Bay Area and Silicon Valley and all of a sudden, whoa, you know, these digital companies and these media companies start popping up, the Twitters and the Ubers. And then you think, man, it'd be great if they came here. As soon as you think that it's too late, you missed it. You know, the people that are getting those companies followed the emergence of the industry from scratch. That's why these are our current 3 industry objectives that are also industries of the future. Aggie Square, which has 12 companies that have signed leases. There's 16 more interested, but they have the Cambridge Innovation Center. So if you Google Cambridge Innovation Center, Boston, and see that company, they've taken 100,000 square feet. That'll completely change the entire economy. That's what folks don't, that's the there. So when people looked at our community when it was first coming here, it was all potential, but no there. You have no there. You don't have big venture funds. You don't have a company doing an IPO. There's no there. You know, you're the hometown guy giving me optimism, but where's the there? So now there's a there. So Aggie Square is going to break ground on $1.1 billion with the Cambridge Innovation Center as an anchor, taking 100,000 square feet. The Cambridge Innovation Center commercializes MIT and Harvard's technology in Boston. So that's a there. You know, it's not some schmoes, it's not some off name, it's boom. And then of course, you move into the California Mobility Center. Flip back to that side, please. Where's the there? Well, this is on the board. So the Chief Technology Officer of Lear and Microsoft and Ford are on the board of the California Mobility Center. So since you got day jobs, we started on this in 2016 when we worked with a company that had this prototype engine, electric vehicle engine. They're like 5 guys. We're like, how the hell do you have a perfectly prototyped electric engine with 5 employees? You know, I mean, where'd you get the money for that? And they said, well, we had it done in Europe at Aachen University with a group called PEM Motion. We're like, really? So then we looked up PEM Motion and found out they had all these clients in the Bay Area and Silicon Valley. So these guys out of Aachen University in Germany would fly all the way to California, meet with their clients in Silicon Valley, right? You know, provide services to them, fly back to Germany. So we met with the CEO and we flew to Germany and said, if you got all these clients in the Bay Area and Silicon Valley, why don't you just build an asset with us in the Sacramento area? And then you can drive 72 miles to see your clients all day long, not fly back and forth. And then plus, you know, you can still live in California. So there are 4 engineers from PEM Motion that live in our community now. We've launched this, it's open. And we have these 4 individuals, but you know, we've raised $30 million for a fund. We have 5 major corporations in partnership with us. Lions Electric, who you may have read, just did their IPO. And everybody's talking about them as being the large urban vehicle version of a Tesla. They have a small R&D team in here. We think they're going to move all of their R&D into our region. So we can literally have a Tesla caliber company having all of their R&D in our region because they're connected to the California Mobility Center, but also because they're connected to the California Air Resource Board. So one of the things I know you've heard all throughout your life, how do we take advantage of the state capital? Fact of the matter is the state capital as a procurement arm isn't that much help to us. You know, they're no different than any other procurement arm. They go out, they have 3 bids, blah, 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 and they will go from there. Ironically, they're actually more helpful as a regulator And so the fact that the California Air Resource Board has been regulating carbon out of the California economy, that's exactly the value proposition to an electric vehicle company. Here, these guys are the market makers. So depending on your business, they're a pain in the neck. But if you're in this carbon-free new industry model, they're the demand policy creator for you, right? So CARB's why everyone buys Tesla cars. They came up with the $7,500 tax credit. So now PEMMotion can work in the market with Toyota, Ford, Microsoft, and Lear, and they can work with the regulators on what the new carbon-free mobility products look like for the future. So the ultimate dream is the California Mobility Center and the California Air Resource Board connect, and we become a commercialization arm for them, which I think is really interesting, right? So, we're now in the process of working with the Newsom administration going, what is the role of what is the role of CARB in creating jobs in our state, not just regulating it, and trying to get people to think in terms of CARB as almost having an economic development goal, not just a regulator's goal. But they're like total regulators. I mean, they're engineers and scientists, and if you want to, they're very smart, but not super creative. FinTech's another example. So Manny Alvarez is on our FinTech board. Manny Alvarez is the state of California's regulator on FinTech. So now we have companies aggregating in Greater Sacramento, and at 4 employees, they're in an initiative with the head regulator for the state. And so these guys are now looking at us. And remember, we used to talk about we should be a petri dish for the state. This is how we can become a petri dish for the state. Not being an experimental arm of procurement, but being an on-the-ground industry interface with the regulators. So we've got 2 new programs we're rolling out this year to the community. One is business retention expansion. And we've already started on this with all the out-migration from Texas. We've identified 300 firms in the region. They're around targeted industries. I know Scott shared with you why tradable sectors matter. That's the gas pedal. If the economy's a car, tradable sectors is the gas pedal. Regulation's the brake. You know, we want to put our foot on the gas. So we have already identified 300 firms. We've talked to 50 of them. And we want to make sure, believe it or not, a lot of times companies leave your community over being frustrated with something simple and they can't get people's attention. So a big part of this retention expansion is also, it's an optimization plan, right? So we're going to take the exact same things we do in the Bay Area and Silicon Valley, right? We're going to take the identical approach. We go into the Bay Area and Silicon Valley, we explain the market, we lay down a set of services and products. We can design your engineering platform with UC Davis and Sac State. I can connect you to the business schools. I can introduce you to all the mayors and the city managers. We now just internalize that pitch. So what we have found out, there's 538 life science companies in this region growing at 10% that could be connected to Aggie Square, right? So now Aggie Square, which is designed to build a new industry and create jobs for our community, suddenly becomes a service provider to the broader region. So you may be in Roseville, what actually a healthcare innovations company in Roseville we're meeting with, and they're growing like gangbusters. And now we're getting them into a joint venture with UC Davis Med at Aggie Square. So these are like centers of excellence, the Mobility Center in Aggie Square. And then of course, where's all the EV activity happening? It's not happening in the city. They don't have any land. Most of the EV activity we're seeing is in that Auburn, El Dorado Hills, Folsom corridor. And then of course, we're seeing a lot of software coming out of Granite Bay. So you can now take your business retention plan, internally do it, use the same digital CRM approach. And then when you bring people in, you're working on tradable sectors. So the very things you're working on to improve your community are not only increasing your ability to attract industry, it increases your ability to grow the industries that are here. So as we like to say, it's all one thing. So the public-private partnerships and cows for economic growth. The public sector explains their problems to the CEOs, and then the CEOs try to help the public sector solve their problems, right? Which is why the homeless issue will probably be something that comes to a head. Because if the business leadership doesn't start showing up going, you guys don't know how to run anything, let us help you with this, it's getting big enough to where my employees don't want to show up at work anymore. these are the things that allow this exchange to occur. We want to maintain our unique value proposition for employers and employees alike for California, not ignoring our problems, but we got everybody bashing us. The last thing we ought to be doing is bashing us. But so the external message is things have never been better in spite of challenges, and every place has challenges. Texas, for instance, evidently can't manage a utility system. So Texas looks so perfect unless you paid $16,000 for a week's worth of electricity. So it's a combination of those factors. And then you want to build your economies around your anchor institutions and centers of excellence. So I know Scott may have run through the digital upskilling we did with the Urban League, but we're now working on a model with Roseville and William Jessup. So inclusion doesn't have to be exclusively a racial conversation, because inclusion is really an equity conversation. And there are women that have been sex trafficked. There are vets that come back with PTSD. We're going to have people coming out of we're going to have a prison reform system that's going to have early release for nonviolent. Well, regardless of where they are, those are folks that need inclusion and lifting. So how do you grow the economy, make it prosperous, improve its competitiveness? How do you include everybody with it? And how do you move forward towards the future are basically our core principles. So I will turn that over. Do I have time for questions, Michelle?
We're going to do it at the end, Barry, because we went a little long.
Who was that? Did I go long or did Scott go long?
It was a combination of both. I'll leave it up.
It was Scott, not me. All right. Thank you, guys.
Hey, everyone. Well, my name is Michelle Willard. I'm the Vice President of Marketing and Public Relations for the organization. I have the absolute best job in the world. I get to work on behalf of the communities in the region to really market ourselves on a national level, and then obviously on a state level as well. So we just launched our What's Next Out West campaign. I think you kind of heard a little bit in the presentation. Economic development in the landscape has changed drastically over the last year due to COVID-19. We're not just fighting for jobs and businesses, we're fighting for talent, which is so unique and different from a marketing perspective. So how do we attract these remote workers to the Sacramento region? We have amazing talent here throughout our region. I want to preface that we do have the talent, but the more talent we have creates more innovation and more jobs for our community in terms of economic development. So we launched this What's Next Out West campaign. We want to be the next best city out west that businesses relocate to. We also want to be the next city out west where people rethink where they live and work. So we're using 2 hashtags. You can go to what'snextoutwest.com and then, next slide. And then we're using Rethink, I don't know where that last slide went. We're using Rethink Remote. So if you go to the Greater Sacramento Economic Council social platforms, you'll see these 2 hashtags. And then when you click on those hashtags, you'll see all these really cool photos about our region come up. So we launched it on December 8th. We increased our Instagram following in Q2 by 115%. This is kind of the demographic we're trying to attract with the campaign, that millennial demographic, anywhere from 25 to 40 years old. We reached 6.5 million people just on that CNBC story alone. I know it seems kind of negative, but it talks about the Sacramento region fighting for our people, and that we launched this talent attraction campaign because we never want talent to leave the state of California at all. As soon as they leave the state of California, we lose that jobs and investment in our communities. So we want them to consider Sacramento before they consider leaving out of state to Austin, whether it's to Boise, whether it's to Salt Lake, whether it's to Portland, et cetera, all the other cities on the west that we compete with, specifically in the Sunbelt states, because people really want, as they work remotely, they're really looking for those warmer climates. Can they go hiking? Can they go skiing? Can they go snowboarding? All those really fun activities. So it's this is the website. It's one central robust location with content, and we're really gonna continue to roll out this campaign. We're doing an ad campaign specifically targeting tech employees in the Bay Area. to consider the Sacramento region. So these are some of the analytics. You can see that we've really increased our engagement. And we did a video with employees that work remotely that have moved from the Bay up here. So if you do see the video on our social media platforms, that's completely unscripted, raw, and that is not us writing that script. That's actually how they feel about our region. So that was kind of a different approach we took. So I'm going to now turn it over to questions for the group, because I definitely want this to be an open dialogue for you guys. So first, does anyone have any questions for myself, Barry, or Scott, just on economic development, on our marketing strategies? I know we kind of threw a lot at you guys. So do you have any questions for us? Don't be afraid either. It's totally, I want this to be a comfortable place for everyone. Okay, if we don't have any questions, are we doing in the chat? Are we doing this in the chat function? We have a remote worker. The company I work for is located in Texas, and I've been working from home for nearly 15 years now. Wow. Okay, so since we don't have any questions, is there anything we discussed that people would be interested in learning more about in depth?
I actually do have a question.
Sure.
This is Jenna Abbott from the River District, and this I guess bad reputation that Sacramento has for being a cow town that it just doesn't really exist. It's a fallacy. You guys are doing a great job of helping to shed it. How do the rest of us work with that? I mean, what kinds of things, what kind of resources are there available? This presentation has been fantastic. I mean, I'm a facts and numbers girl. So how do we get our hands on those facts and numbers in the form of, say, a one sheet or an electronic document that we can just say, you know what, that's old information you're working on. Here's what the real story is.
Sure. If you go to greatersacramento.com and then you go to the top right-hand tab, there's a section that's called collateral, and we house all of our marketing collateral there. So if you ever need any data and information in your own company or personal life that you want to share, it's there. But you know what I can do is, after this call, I have a one-page document with data and analytics just for the Next Out West campaign, talking about how many wineries we have, our quality of life, our talent, how many people are moving here, the workforce we have between the Bay Area and Sacramento. And I can send that out when Olivia sends a follow-up email for you guys, if that would be helpful. I think another thing is just sharing on your social media platforms what our region has to offer. If you are going to Lake Tahoe, tag Lake Tahoe. If you are going to, the Placer County Wine Trail or somewhere in El Dorado Hills, or, whatever you're doing, share that with people on your social platforms, because I guarantee you have friends that live all over the country. And that just resonates our message on how special our region is to live, work, and play here.
The other thing that's really important, so I've been here 6 years now, so I'm now a Sacramentan and a Californian. I feel like that overcoming me over time. Like, I don't have a suit and tie on. I used to sleep in pinstripe suit and ties. Never see me in a suit and tie now. My first 3 years, you never saw me without a suit and tie. Nobody gave me an email that I was alienating everybody culturally, but thanks for that. But one of the other things that, when I came here, like, I still try to remember my initial presence of the community was, it's a really happy community. I mean, minus what's recently happened, people are really happy here. It feels wherever I go in the community, people are pretty happy. So that's a nice strength. The other thing too is, we're not too hard on each other, and that's a nice strength too. But somehow we got to find the balance in expecting more from each other. So when asking what you can do, one of the things that we negative sell the community. I hear it in people's tones. We have our own view of the community's limitations, and too often we share those limitations with other people. And so what we hear I'll just give you a 30-second version. I was pitching a company in the Bay Area, and sometimes people, I think I may have mentioned earlier, people don't like give us a lot of time. We're no different than anybody else. You get 30 minutes, you get an hour. That's like tops. Sometimes a deal like Centene, which is 1.2 million square feet and it'll be 8,000 jobs. I had 3 60-minute presentations with Centene. Worked on it for 18 months, but I got 3 60-minute presentations. That was it. One with the chair, one with the consulting team, and one with the financial negotiating team. That was it. So even the Western headquarters with 8,000 people, they gave us 3 60-minute pitches, and that was over a year. But one of the things that I think is really important, and I really do believe this, we can do anything in this community. It's here. The money's here. The people are here. The talent's here. And we have an unlimited ability from a capacity standpoint to be anything we want to be. I don't hear that in the walk and talk. I'm kind of a brash guy, right? So I walk and talk. I've never walked in a room and wasn't convinced I was the smartest guy. It's probably an egotistical thing to say, but the truth of the matter is, if I go into Silicon Valley and I'm rolling in with a bunch of guys, I'm thinking, yeah, you guys all went to Stanford and Cal, and I was a jock in college, but I'm going to blow your ass out of the water in this hour. I'm going to smoke you. You're not going to keep up with me in the conversation. It's a bizarre thing, but it's how I think. And, I think when I run into people in our community, and, humility has value, but at the same time, we should be talking. I'm working on a 3rd sports team. So I couldn't get anybody to pitch the Oakland A's with me. I had an audience with the Oakland A's. They should be in our town, not in Oakland. And even Kevin Johnson wouldn't buy that pitch. I went to KJ, who, will pitch anybody. I'm like, let's get out and pitch the A's. They're in lawsuit after lawsuit with Oakland. Jesus, let's bring them to Sleep Train or put them in Placer County, or, we should bring the A's up here. I couldn't even get anybody to imagine that as a possibility. And I still bring it up, because you're still down there struggling. So when you see great things happen in a community, you got a 10%. We operate on the 1 to 10% chance model anyway. When we're talking to a company, they're looking at 17 other U.S. communities, So one of the things I think is very important is, how are you talking about your community on a day-to-day basis when you're talking to other people? And what is your own belief system in the future of your community? Because that's contagious. And that's more important than what we'll do on social media.
So So to put a very fine point on that, if you've got any data points or questions that you're looking for, please reach out to any of your favorite GSEC staffers, and we'll coordinate with the research team to get the right information to you. That's part of the services we provide, and is very, very important that you've got the correct talking points. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Dan Flores. He is the District 2 Supervisor at Sutter County. So Dan, thank you very much for closing us out and wrapping us today.
You bet. I'm just highly motivated now after listening to the 3 of you guys talk. And I just want to start by saying thanks to you, Scott and Barry and Michelle, for your presentations and for the work that GSEC put into this presentation today. This is actually my 3rd Champions program, believe it or not. Sutter County, I'm the Sutter County Supervisor, and Sutter County has been involved since the inception of GSEC, and we're proud members. We are going to be building a lot of homes for anyone who wants to move up north, and we gladly host the A's up in Sutter County as well. So, don't forget about us when you are looking for housing or places to locate your business as well. I just hope that everybody's feeling better about this whole thing and understanding it a lot better, that it's not the competition between us, as jurisdictions. It's like Barry said, it's competition between this region and Texas, so we have to think in those terms all the time. I know as politicians, sometimes we just think about, is it us, Sutter County, against, Sacramento County or Yuba County, or, and we have these little arguments about that. But we got to keep thinking big, and keep thinking big as a mega region and as a region as a whole, and we'll remain competitive. And I love the positive, the vibe, today. You, all 3 of you put that out there really well. I love the marketing techniques that are coming together. And Barry, your aggressiveness and your motivation and just, letting us know, hey, just be the smartest people in the room and just be the ones who show the personality, and we'll stand out, right? And that's how we're going to attract business going forward. GSEC has helped us a lot with Sutter County. We're just about to start a project called Sutter Point, where we're going to have about 3,000 homes built just on the Sacramento Sutter County border, just across the street from the international airport. So we're really excited about that, and GSEC has been instrumental in helping us lead the way on that. So that's happening next. So I just want, as we focus on economic recovery, I just want to reiterate that it's important for all of us to work together. And I also want to put out a reminder that GSEC is going to be holding more champion sessions coming up in March. And you can encourage everybody in your jurisdiction to make sure to attend these programs, because you can see how motivating they are. And I just want to thank all of you for taking your time out of your day to join us in this session. Thank you.